Tonight, First Enoch, Part 2, Books 2 and Books 3. So just a quick reminder, you already know this, that the book of Enoch is actually a library. It is not a work. It is actually a collection of 5 different works. An editor, of course, they were written over probably 200-year period, from around the year maybe 400 down to about the year 150. They have different authors, but then finally, probably the last author has edited these together into one kind of book. So there's a richness here. Last week we explored the book of Enoch as a whole and went over book 1, and that is the book. It's kind of a strange concept. We have this group called the Watchers, and so it's called the Book of the Watchers. Now, the Book of the Watchers, which is 1 through 37, contains some of the oldest material in Enoch. Tonight we'll see the other section that's also believed to be as old. Could date back to the 4th century, probably somewhere in the 300s. It's possible that it even predates Alexander the Great. Now, book 1 that we looked at last week has a really interesting theology, unlike anything you find in the Old Testament. It explains the presence of evil in the world, not in terms of sin, which is what our Bible does, our Old Testament. So if you look at the 39 books of the Old Testament that we have, and you're going to ask the question, why is evil in the world? Why do we suffer? Overwhelmingly, the answer is, well, it's because of sin. God told us what to do, and we did not do it, and therefore we've been punished. The Book of the Watchers has an alternative view that actually gets traction later, particularly in Christianity, and that is it's not sin, it's these fallen angels known as watchers. In other words, it's in this book that we got the introduction to what will develop into the ideas of demonic forces, that there are spiritual forces of evil at work in the world. And so the Book of the Watchers gives an account of how that came to be. You also have an account in the Book of Revelation where you have a war breaks out in heaven, and Michael and God's angels go to war against Satan and Satan's angels. Satan is defeated, Satan is cast down, and then Satan goes to war with God's people, the church, the bride. So that theology that you see in Revelation first gets introduced, as far as we can tell, in the Book of the Watchers. Book 1 also contained, if you remember, those cosmic journeys, multiples, tours of heaven, tours of hell. You remember Dante, and there are other literature that do that, Dante's Purgatory, Dante's Inferno, Dante's Heaven. The first time that we see that kind of journeys, cosmic journeys, was again in the Book of Enoch. And of course, there we also have, as we're telling the story of heaven and hell, there's that promise of the ultimate destiny of the good and of the evil. And part of that, again, is that we have the earliest account of the Last Judgment. So the Book of the Watchers is incredibly interesting for us as Christians, because in it we can see the emergence of the first time of many of the central ideas of the New Testament. Tonight we continue, and we're going to look at books 2 and book 3, not written by the same person who did book 1, and by the way, 2 and 3 are not written by the same person either. Book 2 has multiple names. It's known as the Book of the Parables, or the Book of the Similitudes. Well, why is that? Well, it turns out that there's different versions, slight versions of this book that have been discovered and in different languages. And sometimes some of the books refer to these as parables. Some of them refer to it as similitudes. They're actually different words, but it's basically the same 3 parables or the same 3 similitudes. This is among the latest material in the book. It probably dates, and scholars are pretty solid as it does date from the 2nd century BCE, around the time, or probably either right during the time or just after the time of the Maccabees. Book 3, on the other hand, known as the Luminaries, is also known as the astronomical book. Why is that? Well, those two words don't seem close. Again, for the same reason. There are multiple copies of this book that survive, and in different copies, it has slightly different titles. So the luminaries, of course, are the stars in the heavens. And what is it? The astronomical? Well, that's looking in the heavens and stuff. So the related terms, but slightly different. Book 3 is among, like book 1, like the book of the Watchers, is among the earliest material. Matter of fact, many scholars, Nicholson and a couple of the main Enoch scholars, believe that this is the oldest material in the book, likely from the Persian period, so pre-Alexander the Great, 3rd, 4th century BCE. Now, the variety of the material that we're going to cover tonight, this is a reminder, and it testifies to us the rich and diverse material found in Enoch. It's not like some books where from chapter 1 to the end, you get a sort of united, consistent sort of presentation. No, this is several collections of material combined, edited under the theme of Enoch, who was and who was not and who walked with God, and therefore must have been able to see the things of God. And that seems to be a unifying theme. We're going to begin tonight with book 2, alternately called the Parables or the Similitudes. This is Enoch 37 through Enoch 71. Now, the book of the Parables is clearly based on the book of the Watchers. They're connected, but with one big difference. This book shows later development. It's concerned not only with the destiny of the fallen angels and the explanation for why evil is in the world. This book also gets more specific, and it deals specifically with evil kings and rulers and potentates, and we're going to see that a lot in the language in this book. So evil, which was cosmic, now has a very physical manifestation, and it is those people who are ruling us. They are evil. They're oppressing the people of God. Now, this would fit perfectly with the period of the Seleucids and the Maccabees, and really does not fit any other period that well. And the persecution of the Jews under the Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV. So there's a debate here about when this is written. The material is organized into 3 sections, which the author calls parables. They're not parables in the sense that we would use the word. These parables are apocalyptic in content, and they're visionary in form. So the best way to think about them is they are apocalyptic visions like you would find in the book of Revelation and like you would find in the first half of Daniel 1 through 6. The first parable will be about the coming judgment. The second parable will be about the punishment of sinners. So you can see the agenda working here, as well as the reward of God's chosen and what they will receive. And this is that beautiful section of Enoch, which we studied and when we talked about the Life After Death series and the section of the Apocrypha. This has the wonderful sort of resurrection narrative, along with chapter 12 of Daniel would be the earliest known references to resurrection. This book also has an elaborate multi-chapter section on the Son of Man. And that's a term that you should recognize in the New Testament because it's a term that is found in Daniel, and it's found in Ezekiel, and it's found in Enoch, but it's the way it's found in Enoch and Daniel that's pulled into the Gospels. And Jesus will identify that. The Son of Man, or God's chosen one, is going to play a key role in bringing about God's justice and God's judgment. The third parable goes back to the story of Noah and to the flood and sort of lifts it up as an act of God's judgment. So just as God judged at one point in the past and held the human race accountable by Noah, by the flood, so too in the future, God will once again hold humanity accountable and will make things right. The book of parables is going to end, and clearly here it looks like this book, book 2, probably was originally an independent separate work, because this book ends with Enoch being taken up to heaven to be with God. And it has sort of a nice wrap to it. It's in book 2 that we find the Son of Man, the one who will bring God's judgment. And this is the earliest known references to the Son of Man in this sense. Son of Man is also going to be called the Righteous One, the Chosen One, and the Messiah. This is a title that Jesus will use for himself. He will say things like, the Son of Man has no place. Foxes have holes, birds have their nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So Jesus identifies with this. But the book makes it clear that the Son of Man is none other than Enoch himself. So for this writer, when the Son of Man is being used, it's referring to Enoch. Christians will take this term and Jesus and apply it to Jesus. So here's book 2, just a sampling of what's there. Again, 104 chapters, you can't do everything, but I'm just going to kind of go through and give you a kind of feel for what's in this section. This is how it opens in chapter 37. Book 2, the vision which Enoch saw the second time. The vision of wisdom. This is, remember what Richard said? This is a wisdom book. The vision of wisdom which Enoch saw. 3 things were imparted to me. So we're going to get these 3 parables, these 3 similitudes. 3 things were imparted to me, and I began to recount them to those who dwell upon the earth. So this is wisdom coming down from above. First parable, chapter 38. The first thing, when the congregation of the righteous shall appear, sinners shall be judged for their sins. They shall be driven from the face of the earth. So if you're oppressed and persecuted, this would be something that would be good news. It would have been better for them not to have been born. At that moment, when God does this, look here. Kings and rulers, this is a theme we're going to be picking up, shall perish. They shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous and the holy ones, and their life will be annihilated. Not a lot of grace here. Now, in chapter 39, we have a little interesting deal I want to kind of lift up, because this is one of the characteristics of apocalyptic literature, this determinism. Even before the world was created, God knows what is and what will be, from generation to generation. This is a theme we see in apocalyptic literature, that and the things being written in heaven on the tablets or scrolls. You have this in the book of Revelation, you have it in multiple books. But the idea here is that even before the world created, God knows. So this is kind of a predestination, but probably not in the sense that we sometimes think of it. It's predestination in this sense. The outcome of history is known. God has determined it. Therefore, we can trust it. And everything in this book that's said, we can put to bank. Now, going back to kind of like it was in the first book, the book of the Watchers, we now have another vision of heaven. After this, I saw thousands of thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. Now, if you've read the book of Revelation, Revelation picks up this image word for word. I looked, and on the 4 sides of the Lord's spirits, I saw 4 figures different from those who sleep not. That is also picked up in the book of Revelation. Remember the lion, the human, the eagle, and the ox or the cow. I saw 4 figures different from those who slept not. And I learned their names, because the angel who went with me and showed me all these hidden things made the names known to me. Now get ready for something you're going to recognize. And I heard the voices of those 4 figures uttering praise in the presence of the glory of the Lord of glory. The angel who came with me revealed to me, and he also showed me all the hidden things. So Enoch is now privy to everything. And after that, I asked the angel of peace. The angel of peace is the angel who interfaces directly with Enoch. Who are these four faces which I have seen, and whose voices I have heard and written down? Of course, the written down is being the book of Enoch itself. And he said to me, the first one is the merciful and forbearing Michael. This is the Archangel Michael of Christian tradition. The second one, who has set over all disease and every wound of the children of the people, is Raphael. Again, picked up in Christian tradition. The third, who set over the exercise of strength, is Gabriel, picked up in Christian tradition. And the fourth, who has set over all actions of repentance under the hope of those who would inherit eternal life, is Panuel by name. Again, these are four of the seven archangels of Christian tradition. And they are introduced for the first time in history here in this book. Enoch 41, God's judgment of the nations. And after that, I saw all the secrets in heaven. This is a theme we're going to see over and over and over. Enoch gets to see, Enoch knows what's going to happen. Everything that God knows that we don't, Enoch is privy to. Well, how about how a kingdom breaks up? What kingdom might that be? And how the actions of the people are weighed in the balance. There will be an accounting. There will be a judgment. And there I saw a dwelling place of the sinners and the company of the holy ones. And my eyes saw the sinners being expelled from there and being dragged off. And then we get in 42, this passage is just truly remarkable. This becomes the paradigm for the understanding of Jesus in the Gospel of John. And as Richard mentioned, it's wisdom. But in the New Testament, wisdom, as Paul says about Jesus, he is our wisdom. So, see if you recognize this. Wisdom found not a place on earth where she could inhabit. Her dwelling, therefore, is in heaven. Wisdom went forth to dwell among the sons of men, but she obtained not a habitation. She was rejected. Wisdom returned to her place and seated herself in the midst of angels. Again, this is likely the background for how Jesus is understood and presented in the Gospel of John, not in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, only in John. Jesus is in heaven. He descends to earth. He is rejected. He returns to the Father and is now seated amidst the angels. If you wonder in the Gospel of John, where did this kind of a thinking comes from? You simply look at the book of Enoch, and the entire thing is there. Second parable, Enoch 45. This is the second parable concerning those who deny the name of the Lord of Spirits. So this is about judgment and the congregation of the Holy Ones. So it's both, the righteous and the evil. On that day, the day of judgment, I shall cause my elect one, remember this is the Son of Man figure, to dwell among them. I shall transform heaven and make it a blessing of light forever. I shall also transform the earth and make it a blessing. So transforming heaven, transforming earth, new heaven, new earth. Again, this is another place where the imagery from Enoch is picked up and transported directly into the book of Revelation. And cause my elect one to dwell in her. The heavenly Messiah, Enoch 46. There I saw one who had a head of days. That's euphemism in this book for God. I saw one who had a head. I saw God, and his head was like white wool. By the way, some of you may recognize this as kind of an image that you see in art, and an image that a lot of us had as children of God. An old man, white robe, white beard, white hair. Well, there's a reason for that. With him was another, whose face was like that of a man. So we've got God, and now we have a man beside God. His face was full of graciousness. Interesting phrase, grace. like one of the holy angels. And I asked the angel of peace, the one who's talking to him, who went with me and showed me all the things that were hidden about that Son of Man, who he was, where he came from, and why he was with the head of days. He answered me and said to me, this is the Son of Man who has righteousness. Righteousness dwells with him. And all the treasuries of what is hidden, everything we want to know about the future, he will reveal. And the Lord of spirits has chosen him, and he has prevailed through truth. Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and life. I mean, the resonance here is amazing. And this Son of Man, whom you have seen, he will remove, look at the highlighted red. He will remove who? The kings, the mighty from their couches, and the strong from their thrones. This is where that book moves beyond the first book, the book of the Watchers. We're no longer just concerned about cosmic evil. We're now concerned about the presence of evil among those who rule us and oppress us. He will loosen the reins of the strong. He will crush the teeth of the sinners. He will overthrow the kings from their thrones and their kingdoms, because they do not exalt him or praise him or humbly acknowledge whence the kingdom has come to them. By the way, Jesus proclaims the kingdom of God. This is the earliest known reference to this kingdom language. The face of the strong he will turn aside, and he will fill them with shame. It's kind of like Jesus, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. You know, whoever would be great among you must be servant. It's this reversal. Darkness will be their dwelling. Worms will be their couch. And they will have no hope of rising from their couches, rising from the dead, because they do not exalt the name of the Lord of spirits. Enoch 48, more about the Son of Man. In that hour, the Son of Man was given a name in the presence of the Lord of the spirits, before time, even before the creation of the sun and the moon, before the creation of the stars. He was given a name in the presence of the Lord of spirits. This language is picked up in the Gospel of John, the letter to Hebrews, Colossians, and Ephesians, where Christ is seen the one who is pre-existent before creation, and all things are made through him. Again, the first time we see that kind of thinking is here in the book of Enoch. In those days, here we go again, the kings of the earth, look at this, the mighty landowners. Remember the people of the land and the Gola who'd come back? These shall be humiliated. Why? On account of the deeds of their hands. I shall deliver them into the hands of my elect, like grass in the fire and like lead in the water. So they shall burn before the face of the holy ones. Characteristic of apocalyptic literature is the good guys get to see the bad guys get their comeuppance. And this is true here. Enoch 54. The angels will bring, here it is, the kings and the potentates, and throw them into the fire. It's a drumbeat over and over and over. These who have the power and those who are in control, who oppress God's people, there will be a reckoning. Then we have, turning to the saints, this beautiful section of the resurrection, Enoch 51. In those days, the earth shall give back what was entrusted to it. Book of Revelation, the sea shall give back the dead. Same image. Sheol will give back what has been entrusted to it. This is the place of the dead. And destruction will restore what it owes. So everything that's been taken will come back. In those days, mountains shall dance like rams, and the hills shall leap like kids saturated with milk. Of course, you can't ever take that literally, but dancing mountains and leaping hills. But again, it's very similar material in the book of Isaiah. In the book of Acts, when the man born lame is healed at the temple, he leaps like a deer, of this sort of symbolizing God's kingdom arriving. And the faces of all the angels in heaven shall glow with joy, because on that day the elect one has arisen. Here we have a beatitude. Blessed are you, righteous and elect ones, for glorious is your portion. Beatitudes are indicative, as Richard was saying, of wisdom literature. Remember the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount? Jesus being a wisdom teacher. Third parable, 58. And I began to speak another parable concerning the righteous and the elect. Now we go into more condemning of the ruling class. And the Lord commanded the kings, the governors, the high officials, here we go again, the landlords. And he said, open your eyes and lift up your horns if you are able to recognize the chosen one. And the Lord of spirits seated him, the Son of Man, on the throne of glory. That's an image picked up in the New Testament, applied to Jesus. And the Spirit of righteousness was poured upon him. Do you remember the baptism story? And the word of his mouth shall slay all the sinners, and all the oppressors will perish from his presence. Not subtle at all. The righteous and elect ones shall rise from the earth and shall cease being of downcast face. They shall wear the garments of glory. And then we get a vision of heaven, chapter 71. And after that, my spirit was taken away, and it ascended up into heaven. And I saw the sons of the holy angels stepping on flames of fire. You remember in the first book, heaven was described with a floor of fire, ceiling of fire, walls of fire. We think of fire being associated with hell. But in the book of Enoch, heaven is made of fire except for God's throne, which is made of ice. And their garments were white, as were their tunics. Remember in the book of Revelation. Why are their garments white? Because they've been pure in terms of their faith. They've never recanted their faith. Same thing here. And the light of their faces was like snow. They're white. They're pure. They have been faithful to God. They have not given up their faith. And I saw 2 rivers of fire, and a light of that fire shone like hyacinth. And I fell on my face before this Lord of spirits. Same image used in the book of Revelation for John. And the angel Michael, one of the archangels, first time we have the language of archangel, took me by my right hand and raised me up. He showed me all the secrets of mercy. And he showed me all the secrets of righteousness. And he showed me all the secrets of the events of heaven. And he took my spirit to the heavens of heavens. And I saw there a house built with hailstones. This thing of fire, and in the middle of it, ice, built of ice. And between those stones were tongues of living fire. And my spirit saw a circle that encircled the house of the fire. This goes back to the book Ezekiel. You know, the wheel in the middle of the wheel. An image gets picked up in the book of Revelation. God's throne has wheels. God's throne is mobile. God's throne is a war chariot. My spirit saw a circle that encircled that house of fire. From the 4 sides of the house came rivers full of living fire that encircled the house. And I saw angels that could not be counted. Thousands of thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. This is a repeat from what we heard earlier. They were surrounding that house. This exact same image picked up and used in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, chapter 4, and later in the book. Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Paniel, and the holy angels who are in the heights of heaven were going in and out of that house. And with them was the head of days, God. And his head was white and pure as wool, and his garments were indescribable. And I fell on my house with my face, and all my flesh melted. My spirit was transformed. Classical mystical experience. And I cried out with a loud voice, I am blessed, I am praised, I am exalted. And those blessings that went forth from my mouth were acceptable in the presence of the head of days. And he came to me, God came to Enoch, and greeted me with his voice, and said to me, you are that Son of Man, born from righteousness. So it's here we learn that Enoch, in the book of Enoch, Enoch is the Son of Man. And the righteousness of the head of days will not forsake you. And he said to me, he proclaims peace to you in the name of the age that you're in now, that is to be, the age to come. From there, peace has proceeded from the creation of the age, and thus you will have it forever. And all will walk in your path, since righteousness has never forsaken you. And you will be their dwelling, and from you they will not be separated. And thus there will be length of days with the Son of Man, and there will be peace for the righteous, and the path of truth for the righteous, in the name of the Lord of spirits, forever and ever. It's one of the most glorious pieces of literature ever to be produced from the Jewish canon. Again, echoes of the book of Revelation at every turn. Book 3, now we're going to go to a very different kind of literature. The book of the luminaries, this is what Richard was talking about earlier, is really focused on the movements of heavenly bodies. And again, we're still fascinated by the movements of the planets and the stars and everything in the heavens. And same was true of ancient cultures. They were also convinced that basically when things happen in heaven, it would say something about things going on the earth. This book is unlike anything else in previous literature we've seen. It does continue some of the themes of the other books, or I guess this book is maybe the earliest. You might say this book lays down some themes that the other books pick up. But it focuses on the heavens as the handiwork of God. This book can essentially be seen as an expansion of material found in Genesis 1. So for example, Genesis 1, 14 to 18, we have this. And God said, let there be lights, let there be luminaries in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night. And let them, the luminaries, be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. We divide time by the luminaries. And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, along with the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. Now again, the Book of Luminaries is essentially an elaborate expansion of development of what we just seen. In the Book of the Luminaries, the objects in the heavens move, we're told, according to the laws of God. And so here we get kind of a connection with the Torah, Enoch 72. This is the first law of the luminaries, the sun. So just as Genesis starts with the sun, Enoch starts with the sun. The sun is a luminary whose rising is in an opening in heaven, which is located in the direction of the east, and whose setting is in another opening of heaven located in the west. And then, of course, it proceeds to talk about each of the things that are in the heavens. The idea here is that the dependable movements, and you can put them, one of the things the ancients knew about, the sunrise, sunset, the movements of the moon, the movements of the stars, for the most part, very predictable. You can, if you know them, you can know when to plant your crops, when to do all kinds of things. So the dependable movements of the heavenly bodies for this author shows that God is in control, and therefore God can be trusted. And this becomes one of the central themes of apocalyptic literature. This is that predestination, and you see it here grounded in the movements of heavenly bodies. In the same way, we get language of the heavenly tablets. Richard read a little bit of that. We will too. Show that God's future can be trusted. The coming judgment of the ruling elites and the coming reward of God's chosen that we see announced in the book of Enoch are just as trustworthy as the movements of the heavenly bodies. That seems to be the argument. Strikingly, this is a natural theology argument based on the best science of the day. It's like when the psalmist says, the heavens declare the glory of God. It's that kind of an argument. The message is that since the heavens are directed by God, we should pay attention to their movements. The calendar is important. Obedience to God means following the calendar correctly. Sin is to ignore or to change that calendar. So one of the big issues in the book of Enoch is it going to be the lunar calendar or the solar calendar? We know that the Jewish faith today is based on the lunar calendar. The book of Enoch is based on the solar calendar. So there's a little bit of a war about what calendar do you use. Right religious observance is determined by an understanding of the heavenly world. See, if you think about it, all the festivals and the feasts and the holidays of the Jews that are going to be celebrated in the temple, well, how do you determine when those are set? Well, it's the luminaries that tell you when certain things. So certain holidays fall after the first full moon and things like that. There's a book by Collins called Apocalyptic Imagination. He, one of the great authors of this material, and he made that comment. Now, all of this is based on what is called astrological prediction. So here's the content of this section, just a summary. In chapter 2, we narrate the sun. Chapter 73, the moon. Chapter 74, systems of rotation. That really has to do with movements in the heavens. Particularly, it has to do with phases, like the phases of the moon. Chapter 75, the stars and their positions. Chapter 76, the 12 winds, sort of one. Think of the zodiac, the 12 signs of the zodiac. Well, there's a wind associated with each of those. And again, the zodiac is connected, of course, to the stars. Chapter 77, the 4 directions, the 7 mountains, the 7 rivers, those sevens that Richard was talking about. Chapter 78, names for the phases of the sun and the moon. Chapter 79, conclusions on the various seasons. Chapter 80 sort of rounds us off with saying there's some similarity between sinners and seasons, sort of tying this back to kind of a theology. So here's some sampling. Chapter 73, book 3. The book of the itinerary of the luminaries of heaven, how the luminaries move. The position of each and every one. 75 talks about the heavens. The signs, the durations of time, the years, and the days were shown to me by, here's another one of the 7 archangels, Uriel, whom the Lord, God of eternal glory, notice we have a different name for God now, has appointed over all the luminaries of heaven, both in heaven and the world, in order that they, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all the created objects which circulate, and all the chariots of heaven, so now if they move, something moves in something like chariots, should rule in the face of the sky and be seen on the earth. Why? To be guides for the day and for the night. Exactly what Genesis says. Chapter 81, after all this, sort of the tour of the heavens, contains the climax of this book. Enoch is told to read from the tablets of heaven. These tablets serve as guarantors of God's future. It's written in stone. You can put it in the bank. And that everything that is contained in the book of Enoch is set in stone and can be trusted. Enoch 81. Then he said to me, Enoch, look at the tablets of heaven. These are actually here Babylonian tablets, clay tablets that have cuneiform on them, and then they're baked. So this is probably what the author is thinking of. And by the way, these things are virtually indestructible. They can't be destroyed, but it'd be real, real hard. Read what is written on them and understand each element one by one. So I looked at the tablets of heaven, read all the writing on them, and came to understand everything. This is the definition of wisdom. I read that book. Book's actually an anachronistic term. I read that tablet and all the deeds of humanity and all the children of the flesh upon the earth and of all the generations of the world. Back up a second. So what these tablets contained is the deeds of each and every person. You may remember your parents talking about, that somebody keeps a record. That's the idea here, that nothing slips by. Every good deed you've ever done, every bad deed you've ever done has been recorded in tablets, God knows, for all the generations of the world. Another beatitude. Blessed is the man who dies righteous and is upright, against whom no record of oppression has been written, and who received no judgment that day. The book of the Luminaries ends by connecting wrong calendar practice with sin. Enoch 82. Blessed, not a beatitude, blessed are the righteous ones who walk in the street of righteousness, who have no sin in the computation of the days in which the sun goes its course in the sky. Using the wrong calendar is a sin. With that, books 2 and 3 come to an end.